True power never shouts, it enters the room. Before you do, they told you that power means being the loudest in the room. They said you have to take up space, raise your voice, interrupt, dominate conversations, as if influence were something you could force onto others. But those who truly understand power know a deeper, quieter truth. Real power doesn't announce itself. It's already been felt the moment you walk in. You don't need to demand respect when your presence already commands it. Niccolò Machiavelli observed centuries ago that the strongest rulers weren't those who made the most noise. It was the ones who said the least and were feared the most. He noticed that weak princes constantly tried to prove they deserved the crown. They shouted, postured, flexed authority, but behind the show was insecurity. The truly powerful governed by being, by presence, not performance. We see it today too. Think of the executive who only speaks once in a meeting and suddenly the entire tone shifts. No need to dominate, no need to explain. Why? Because people feel the weight of their silence. When they speak, others lean in. That is quiet confidence. That is power. If you constantly feel the need to prove your worth, fight for attention, or explain your every move, pause. Ask yourself, would someone who already knows their value behave like this? True authority begins the moment you stop chasing validation and start cultivating stillness. It's not about hiding, it's about being so centered, so grounded that others naturally gravitate toward you. Your voice doesn't need to be loud if your presence speaks louder. Your actions don't need to scream if your essence already whispers power. Real influence isn't about overwhelming others. It's about being so composed, so self-assured that people can't ignore you even if you say nothing at all. This is the paradox. The more you push for attention, the more invisible you become. But when you pull back, when you refine your energy, when you speak only when it matters, the world listens. Not because you demanded it, but because you embodied it. So stop measuring your worth by how much noise you make. Start refining the silence you carry. Power isn't a performance, it's presence. And those who possess it never have to say a word, because the room already knows. The more you beg, the less you're valued. Transform need into power. There's a truth most people never realize until it's too late. The more you chase, the faster they run, whether it's love, respect, recognition, or opportunity. When you approach it with desperation, people instinctively pull away. Not because they're cruel, but because something about neediness repels. It signals emptiness, and human nature is wired to avoid what drains energy. Friedrich Nietzsche saw this in its rawest form. He noticed that the more someone pleads to be loved or accepted, the less others want to give it. It's not conscious, it's instinct. We move away from what feels clingy and move toward what feels full-grounded, self-contained, because people don't respect need, they respect value. Think about the last time someone begged you for help with desperation in their voice. You probably felt uneasy, maybe even slightly resistant. Now remember the last time someone offered you support, freely expecting nothing in return. You felt grateful, didn't you? Maybe even inspired to return the gesture. That's the difference. One energy repels, the other attracts. When you operate from lack, you push people away. When you operate from self-sufficiency, you draw them in. That's the secret most people miss. You're not supposed to chase, you're supposed to become. Instead of asking others to give you something, be someone they naturally want to give it to. Stop begging for love. Become so stable, so secure in yourself that your presence feels like an emotional anchor. Stop pleading for respect. Become the kind of person who walks into the room and gets it without asking. This doesn't mean isolation or arrogance. It means self-possession. Nietzsche called it auto-dependence, not cutting yourself off from others, but becoming whole enough that you don't drain them, that you offer, not extract. Look at the most magnetic people. They don't ask for validation, they radiate it. They don't chase attention, they attract it through calm strength. When you give without need, serve without expectation, and love without pleading, people start to wonder, what is it about you? And that curiosity turns into respect. You don't need to scream for recognition. You just need to be so grounded that people feel relieved around you, so full that others come to you when they feel empty. That's power, not through pressure, but through presence. Not by demanding energy, but by being the source of it. The power of speaking. Last, control the room without forcing it. In a world obsessed with being first to speak, first to post, first to respond, the truly powerful move in the opposite direction. They wait. They watch. They listen. Because timing isn't just about when to act, it's about when not to. And when it comes to power, speaking last often means speaking with the most control. Think about it. The person who speaks first in a negotiation reveals everything. Their goals, their fears, their urgency. They hand over their leverage before the conversation has even begun. But the one who holds back, who absorbs, who allows others to expose themselves first, that's the one who sees the whole board before making a move. This principle, subtle but lethal, is what separates the impulsive from the strategic. In meetings and relationships and conflict, those who rush to prove they know something often prove they know very little. The truly influential resist that urge. They let others speak, reveal, contradict themselves. And then when the room is quiet, they drop a sentence that shifts the entire tone. Why? Because they speak from clarity, not anxiety. Nietzsche observed this pattern among intellectuals of his time. The ones who defended their ideas too early were often dismantled by sharper minds. But those who patiently listened gathered every angle, and only then presented their view. They weren't just respected, they were feared. Their words carried weight, not because they said more, but because they said better. Silence isn't weakness, it's surveillance. Observation is a weapon. When you listen first, you see what others are hiding, what they're desperate to protect, what they fear you might notice. And once you see that you no longer react, you respond with precision. That's what makes scarcity so powerful. Not just the scarcity of time or presence, but the scarcity of speech. When you speak less, every word becomes more valuable. People lean in. They anticipate your input. You're no longer just participating, you're commanding the flow. This is not about manipulation, it's about mastery. Of yourself, of timing, of emotional patience. The world gives power to those who don't rush to take it. So the next time you feel the pressure to speak, to prove, to fill the silence, don't. Hold it. Own it. Because the one who speaks last often owns the room. See through the smile. The hidden power of reading intentions. Most people listen to what others say. The wise watch what others do. Because in the real world, words are costumes, but behavior always tells the truth. Beneath every compliment, every favor, every well-timed text, there's often a second layer, a hidden motive. And those who can read that second layer aren't just smart, they're safe. Arthur Schopenhauer spent years dissecting the gap between what people say and what they truly want. He noticed a haunting pattern. Most human interactions are transactional in disguise. The praise that feels too sweet, the apology that arrives too late, the invitation that comes right when you have something they want. These aren't coincidences, they're signals. And when you learn to see them, you stop being the hunted. You become the observer. It's not about paranoia, it's about protection. It's not about assuming the worst. It's about understanding the game. There are 3 red flags Schopenhauer identified that still hold true today. First, overjustification. When someone explains too much too fast, it's often because the real reason would raise suspicion. Second, emotional mismatch. When their expression doesn't match the moment. A fake laugh, forced empathy. Third, suspicious timing. When someone reappears in your life the moment you gain status, success, or opportunity. That's not reconnection, that's strategy. Most people don't want to manipulate you maliciously, but they do want something: approval, access, resources, validation. And unless you can read through their intent, you become the tool they use to get it. You give energy where it isn't earned. You trust words that were meant to flatter, not to honor. And in the end, you pay a price with your time, your peace, or your dignity. But once you become fluent in hidden intentions, everything changes. You stop over-explaining yourself. You stop walking into emotional traps. You stop wondering why people suddenly changed. They didn't change, you just finally saw them clearly. Schopenhauer didn't become cold from this awareness, he became calm. Because when you see people as they are, not as they present themselves, you no longer feel betrayed. You feel prepared. This doesn't mean cutting people off. It means watching long enough to know who's real and who's just rehearsing a role. So the next time someone flatters you, pause. Listen not just to what they say, but why they're saying it. The truth is rarely in the words. It's always in the motive. Your mask isn't a lie. It's a tool. Learn to wear it with intention. We're told to be ourselves as if there's only one version of us, singular, fixed, unchanging. But the truth, as Carl Jung discovered, is far more complex. You are not one self. You are many. And the most powerful people are not those who expose everything they are. Those who choose what to reveal and when to reveal it. Not to deceive, but to survive influence and connect with precision. Jung called these personas the masks we wear in different contexts. One for work, one for intimacy, one for leadership, one for reflection. And he was clear, wearing a mask doesn't make you fake, it makes you adaptable. What's dangerous isn't the mask, it's being unaware of it, or worse, being controlled by it. Weak people either reveal too much or hide everything. They overshare their pain to strangers and call it honesty. Or they build a stone wall so high no one can reach them and call it strength. But both are blind reactions. Neither is mastery. Jung understood that real influence comes from conscious self-expression, knowing when to be soft and when to be steel, when to lead and when to listen, when to speak with fire and when to disappear into stillness. This isn't manipulation, it's emotional intelligence in its highest form. The best therapists, leaders, negotiators, and creators don't show up the same way for every person. They adapt strategically, and that's why they win trust so quickly. Being strategic with your persona doesn't mean losing yourself. It means becoming so grounded in who you are that you can shift expression without losing integrity. Like a skilled actor who still knows who they are, once the performance ends, you remain rooted even while you adapt. You're not faking, you're translating. Jung did this in his own life. He became the father figure for the lost, the challenger for the arrogant, the explorer for the curious. And in doing so, he accessed different parts of himself that would have remained dormant had he tried to be just one thing all the time. This is your invitation. Stop seeing authenticity as naked exposure. Start seeing it as conscious alignment. Show the part of you that serves the moment. And when the moment shifts, so can you without losing your center. Because the most powerful persona is the one you control. Rejection isn't a death sentence. It's a directional sign. Most people experience rejection like a punch to the chest. It rattles the ego, shakes your sense of worth, and leaves behind the bitter taste of not good enough. Whether it's a failed relationship, a missed promotion, or a cold silence after vulnerability, we tend to internalize it as proof of our inadequacy. But here's the truth. Rejection is not a verdict. It's a message. And only the wise know how to read it. There's a small group of people in this world who get stronger after every no. Not because they're emotionless, but because they've trained themselves to ask better questions. Not, what's wrong with me, but what is this trying to teach me? They don't crumble when faced with judgment. They grow sharper, more strategic, more centered. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king of Rome, lived this truth. When he was first passed over as heir to the empire, many believed he was too young, too introspective, too philosophical to lead. He could have sulked, he could have turned bitter, but instead he turned rejection into ritual. He studied leadership obsessively, trained his speech, mastered military command, not to prove his worth, but to refine it. That's the lesson. Rejection only hurts if you believe it defines you. But if you shift your lens, it becomes a map, pointing out the gaps in your preparation, the cracks in your identity, the places where your confidence is still dependent on external validation. In that sense, rejection is one of the most honest mirrors life ever offers. The average person treats rejection as punishment. The powerful treat it as data. Every "you're not ready" becomes "here's where to grow." Every "you're not enough" becomes "here's what to build." This isn't motivational fluff. It's a mindset rooted in emotional maturity. Because your greatest progress rarely comes from applause. It comes from resistance. The difference between people who collapse after rejection and those who evolve from it isn't what happened to them, it's what they did with it. Did they shut down, or did they sharpen? Did they seek revenge, or did they seek mastery? You don't get to control how others respond to you, but you do control how you respond to them. And if you can learn to see rejection not as an end but as refinement, you'll no longer fear it. You'll use it. Because sometimes the door that closes isn't a punishment. It's protection, redirection, and preparation for a version of you that's still being forged in fire. Lead without commanding. The quiet power of asking the right questions. Most people try to influence others by talking louder, arguing harder, or presenting better evidence. But the truth is, real influence doesn't come from convincing people. It comes from letting them convince themselves. And the most powerful way to do that isn't with commands. It's with carefully crafted questions. Niccolò Machiavelli understood this centuries ago as he studied Cesare Borgia, one of the most feared and respected leaders of the Italian Renaissance. Borgia never charged into a room with grand declarations. He didn't demand loyalty. He guided people to conclusions they believed were their own. And the way he did it was deceptively simple. He asked the right questions at the right moment. When Borgia wanted an alliance, he didn't beg for it. He asked, "What threats do you see on the horizon?" And then, "How do you plan to face them alone?" He didn't force people into partnerships. He led them to realize they needed one. That's not manipulation. That's emotional strategy. The human ego resists being told what to do, but it welcomes the opportunity to arrive at its own insight. When you push someone, they push back. But when you ask the kind of question that lingers in their mind, you plant a seed. And when that seed grows into realization, they not only agree with you, they believe the idea was theirs. That's when they'll defend it with conviction. Think about your own life. The times you truly changed, was it because someone told you to, or because someone asked a question that made you see yourself differently? Influence isn't about overpowering, it's about alignment. It's the art of seeing where someone is stuck and asking just the right thing to loosen the knot. It's not fast, it's not flashy, but it's incredibly effective. We instinctively do this with the people we love, asking, guiding, supporting. But in professional or high-stakes situations, we often forget. We revert to pressure logic commands, and we fail. The lesson is simple but transformative. Stop trying to force outcomes. Start creating questions that open doors. When you learn to guide rather than push, to mirror rather than dominate, you become someone others want to follow, not because they have to, but because they choose to. And that kind of influence, it doesn't fade, it multiplies. Because at the end of the day, the idea that changes someone's life isn't the one you force on them, it's the one you help them discover inside themselves. The paradox of power. Why showing your scars can make you stronger. We've been conditioned to believe that strength means silence, that to be respected we must be unshakable, unreadable, untouchable. But real power doesn't come from pretending you're invincible. It comes from showing you're human on purpose with control. This is the paradox of strategic vulnerability. When done with intention, it doesn't make you weak. It makes you unforgettable. Think about it. When a leader admits they were wrong, we don't lose respect. We gain trust. When someone powerful shares a fear or past wound, we don't see fragility, we see depth. Why? Because vulnerability builds connection. It reminds us that behind the titles and masks and armor, there's a person, and we're wired to follow people, not machines. Marcus Aurelius, one of history's most revered emperors, understood this in a way most modern leaders still don't. During a plague that devastated Rome, he didn't put on a mask of false optimism. He didn't issue empty promises or pretend to have all the answers. Instead, he walked the streets weeping with the people, admitting his grief and uncertainty. And instead of being seen as soft, he became even more respected. Because courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the willingness to face it publicly. But make no mistake, this kind of vulnerability isn't random. It's not oversharing for sympathy or collapsing into others for validation. That's emotional chaos, not power. Strategic vulnerability is a choice to reveal just enough of your inner world to build trust, spark loyalty, and inspire authenticity in others. It's power dressed in humility. When someone who seems strong shows you their humanity, it doesn't shrink them, it expands them. It makes you lean in, it makes you remember them. Because in a world of polished personas and perfect facades, realness is rare and rare is valuable. But timing is everything. Vulnerability only becomes strength when you reveal it with purpose, not in the middle of a breakdown, but after reflection. Not to be saved, but to say, I've felt this too, and I'm still standing. That's when people don't just follow you, they protect you. So don't fall for the myth that being untouchable makes you powerful. It makes you lonely and eventually irrelevant. Instead, master the art of showing your scars with elegance. Because the strongest people aren't the ones who hide their wounds, they're the ones who turn them into a language of leadership. You don't demand loyalty, you earn it through character. True loyalty isn't forged through fear, bribery, or emotional blackmail. It can't be bought with rewards or threatened into existence. It's not about control, it's about character. Real loyalty arises when people sense deep down that you would stand for them even when it's inconvenient, even when no one is watching. Aristotle spent years studying what made certain leaders beloved and others merely tolerated. He came to one radical conclusion: people give their loyalty not to perfection but to integrity. The kind of quiet, consistent integrity that shows up in small moments, not grand speeches. Not in what you promise, but in what you sacrifice. Look at Alexander the Great. Most remember his military brilliance. Few remember what made men follow him to the ends of the earth: his humility. When his army was starving, he ate last. When there wasn't enough water, he poured out his share in front of his men, showing he would rather thirst with them than quench himself alone. That wasn't a performance. That was presence. And in that moment, he earned more than obedience, he earned devotion. The truth is, people can feel when you care more about them than your own comfort, and that feeling is rare. That's why it inspires loyalty, not because you demand it, but because your actions prove you deserve it. Loyalty born from respect outlasts loyalty born from fear. One disappears when you're no longer useful. The other remains even when you're not in the room. Most people don't understand this. They try to earn loyalty by giving gifts, solving problems, being liked. But the most magnetic leaders do something else. They make people feel safe, not through power, but through virtue. They're dependable in private fare when no one's watching and silent about the good they do. And that silence, it echoes. Integrity is the quiet rhythm that makes people trust you. Not once, but always. It's in the way you show up when it's inconvenient. In the way you speak about someone when they're not around. In the way you do what's right even when it costs you. Loyalty isn't about how many people clap when you win. It's about who stands by you when you're silent, struggling, or doubted. You don't have to chase it. You have to live in a way that makes it inevitable. So forget forcing people to stay. Instead, become the kind of person whose presence makes others feel stronger and whose absence is impossible to replace. Silence isn't surrender. It's mastery over the need to be understood. The moment you defend yourself, you've already accepted the attacker's frame. You've stepped into their arena on their terms and handed them power not by what you say, but by the fact that you felt compelled to say anything at all. Because defending yourself doesn't just acknowledge the accusation, it dignifies it. In a culture obsessed with image and explanation, silence feels dangerous. When someone questions your character, your motives, or your competence, every cell in your body screams, "Prove them wrong." You want to speak up. You want to set the record straight. But here's the truth. Most people never learn. The more you explain, the more they suspect. The more you justify, the more they doubt. The more you try to prove your innocence, the guiltier you look. There's a rare kind of power in restraint, in refusing to validate an insult by responding to it, in knowing that not every opinion deserves your energy and not every critic deserves your attention. Sun Tzu, the great strategist, observed this centuries ago. Generals who rushed to explain their losses lost even more credibility, but those who remained silent, who kept their posture, their calm, their composure, retained respect even in defeat. Why? Because silence in the face of attack communicates one unshakable message. Your judgment of me means nothing, and that is strength. Not because you're too weak to fight back, but because you've already won the inner war. The war for approval, for validation, for control over perception. You no longer operate on their battlefield. You've elevated the entire game. There's a difference between being passive and being impenetrable. Refusing to respond doesn't mean surrender. It means sovereignty. It means you decide when and how your energy is used, not the person trying to provoke you. Silence becomes a statement, a refusal, a boundary, and often it wounds more deeply than any reply ever could. The accuser is left exposed, ranting into a void, and the more noise they make, the more others begin to wonder, why are they trying so hard? In contrast, your silence begins to feel like confidence, like stability, like truth. So the next time someone tries to bait you with criticism or false claims, pause. Don't rush in to clear your name. Don't feed the fire. Let the accusation starve. Let it die from lack of attention. Because in the end, what you refuse to explain tells the world you are beyond judgment, and that alone is a power very few ever master. Power is not a performance. It's a daily ritual of presence. The most magnetic people you've ever met didn't try to impress you. They didn't speak the most, dress the flashiest, or boast about their accomplishments. And yet when they entered a room, you felt it. Their presence was undeniable. Their energy didn't ask for attention, it commanded it. That kind of presence is not an accident. It's a practice, a ritual, a way of being built intentionally every single day. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher emperor of Rome, understood this better than anyone. Before facing emperor's armies and advisors, he faced himself every morning. In the quiet hours before the world demanded his decisions, he practiced reflection. Not for clarity alone, but for alignment. He reminded himself, I do not need to prove anything today. He centered his focus on where his energy was most valuable. He visualized how to show up with intention, not reaction. And at night, he reviewed not just what he did, but who he became in each moment. That's the secret. Presence doesn't come from power. Power comes from presence, and presence is something you cultivate. In the silence of your mornings, in the restraint of your speech, in the depth of your listening. The world tries to pull you in 1,000 directions, each one demanding urgency. But those who rise above the noise do so by mastering the one space most people ignore themselves. Modern society tells you to hustle, to grind, to chase attention. But that path leads to burnout, not magnetism. The truly powerful conserve their energy like it's gold. They don't give their presence away freely. They choose where to place it. They guard it. And that selectiveness makes them rare, and being rare makes them irresistible. It's not about pretending to be calm. It's about becoming calm. Not about faking confidence, but embodying it through emotional sovereignty. When you move with purpose, people feel it. When you speak less, but with weight, people listen. When you know your value, you don't need to announce it. It radiates through every gesture. So if you want to build true presence, the kind that lingers long after you've left the room, start here. Create a ritual of inner alignment. Morning stillness, daily reflection, intentional words, measured reactions, purposeful absence. These aren't habits, they're foundations. And with time, they shape not just how the world sees you, but how you move through the world. Because in the end, your presence is your power, and your ritual is the forge. Live with weight, not noise. The quiet rules of real power. In a world that rewards the loudest voices and fastest reactions, there's a deeper path. Few ever take the path of quiet strength. You don't need to prove your worth to everyone. You don't need to chase attention, justify your choices, or beg for validation. The most powerful people are those who move with calm precision, who speak with purpose, and who don't need applause to know they matter. The lesson is simple. Stop trying to be everything to everyone. Instead, become someone whose energy speaks louder than their words. Build rituals that ground you. Learn to read people not by what they say, but by what they need. Speak last in the room. Observe more. Offer more than you ask. That's how influence is born, not by force, but by presence. You don't inspire loyalty by being perfect. You earn it by being dependable, even when no one's watching. You don't become confident by avoiding rejection. You grow through it, using it as a tool, not a wound. And perhaps most importantly, you don't defend yourself to everyone who doubts you. You let your life speak for itself. Every day offers you a choice: react or refine, perform or become. The quietest people are often the most remembered, not because they shouted, but because they stood for something deeper. Be that person. Not the loudest in the room, but the most centered. Because in the end, real power isn't about controlling others, it's about mastering yourself.